a actually structure which is totally called spinal cord. So spinal cord has several segments, right? So this is the organization that is responsible for spinal reflexes. We have the second system or second organization called propriospinal. Propriospinal organization means we have some neurons in any segment that send their axons up or down and make connections with other segments. So they are vertical systems, they are vertical organizations, right? So the first one was segmental organization. So each segment can function as its own, right? But we have propriospinal organization which is located vertically. And it can provide connections between different segments, right? And the third one is descending pathways. So descending motor pathways come from the brain and go down through the spinal cord. They are also involved in organization of the movement, planning of the movement, and in performance, right? So, three anatomical organizations that are responsible for movement in the spinal cord include segmental, propriospinal, and descending pathways. Right? So let's see them by some figures and examples. Segmental organization is like this. So in the gray matter of the spinal cord, we have dorsal horn, ventral horn, and intermediate zone, right? Dorsal horn is sensory, ventral horn is motor. So in the sensory part, we have neurons that go to the opposite side and go up. We have seen this for pain and for temperature, right? But in the ventral horn, we have motor neurons. So they connect to the skeletal muscles. So neurons that go from the spinal cord to the muscles have their somas in ventral horn of the spinal cord. Ventral horn of the spinal cord. So we have two types of neurons here, alpha and gamma. Alpha is larger, gamma is smaller. Remember that we had A alpha fibers, A beta fibers, A gamma fibers, and A delta fibers, right? So alpha neurons here use A alpha fibers, but gamma neurons here use A gamma fibers, right? So gamma is smaller, alpha is larger. Both of them are motor neurons. So they innervate the muscle and cause contraction. Let's see, okay? So sensory neurons are here in the dorsal horn, interneurons are here in the intermediate zone, mainly anterior motor neurons are here in the ventral. So we have alpha motor neurons, gamma motor neurons. Alpha motor neurons innervate extrafusal muscles, gamma motor neurons innervate intrafusal muscles. What are these? We'll see. Okay? So actually, let me talk about this here. In the muscle, we have muscle fibers, right? You know this. In the fibers, we have actin and myosin. Actin and myosin contract to have contraction, right? So the force of muscle contraction is made by muscle fibers. They are called extrafusal fibers, right? But between these layers, between these fibers, we have smaller structures called spindles. Okay? Spindles are very small, almost 1 centimeter long, right? They are located between the fibers. So inside these spindles, we have smaller fibers, very small, right? So they are called intrafusal fibers. So we have extrafusal fibers that are large and cause contraction, but we have also smaller ones that are called intrafusal fibers. They don't cause contraction. They are receptors. Receptors located inside the muscle, right? So intrafusal fibers are receptors. Extrafusal fibers are muscle fibers that contract, right? Now, alpha fibers. Alpha fibers innervate extrafusal fibers, so they cause contraction. Gamma motor neurons or gamma fibers innervate spindles or intrafusal fibers, so they don't cause contraction, right? So, in the ventral horn of the spinal cord, we have alpha motor neurons that innervate the muscles. Let's see the arrangement of these alpha motor neurons. Some of the neurons go to distal muscles of the arm and distal muscles of the legs, right? So they innervate fingers and wrists, or toes and ankles, right? So they are located in the lateral region. So in the ventral horn, we have lateral area, medial area. Alpha motor neurons that are located in the lateral area innervate distal muscles of the arm, fingers and wrists. Alpha motor neurons that are located in the medial side innervate proximal part of the arm and also truncal muscles or axial muscles, right? So axial muscles that are muscles around the spine, muscles of the neck, and muscles of the trunk, right, are innervated by alpha motor neurons located medially. But muscles that actually cause movement of the fingers and wrists are innervated by alpha motor neurons located laterally. So between these two, lateral, medial, we have medial alpha motor neurons that innervate proximal parts, like shoulder and elbow, right? So this is the arrangement. And for any part of the body, we have flexor muscles, extensor muscles. Flexor muscle cause bending, extensor muscles cause extension, right? So alpha motor neurons that innervate flexor muscles tend to be located posteriorly. Alpha motor neurons that cause extension of the arm are located most anterior, right? So, please pay attention to me and don't talk. So, propriospinal organization. I told you that neurons in one segment send their axons up or down and make connections with other segments. So this is a vertical type of organization, right? So for coordination of movements that originate from different segments. So you can see here that propriospinal neurons may have also lateral medial organization. The lateral one goes some segments up or down and activate alpha motor neurons that are located laterally, that are for contraction of distal part of the arm, right? But propriospinal neurons that are located medially go up and down for several segments and make connections with alpha motor neurons that are located medially for coordination of movements in proximal part of the arm and in trunk and axial muscles, right? So this is propriospinal organization. So they are for connection of several segments. We will see this in other slides again. So descending pathways, they come from the brain, different areas, cortex or regions in the brain stem. They come down, go through the spinal cord and reach the segments, right? In the segments, they make connections with interneurons, and then interneurons make connections with anterior motor neurons. So descending neurons go to interneurons go to alpha motor neurons or gamma motor neurons. Alpha and gamma motor neurons go to the muscles, right? So this is another type of organization. So based on the lateral medial divisions I talked before about alpha motor neurons, we have two different descending pathways. So, lateral descending pathways, medial descending pathways. Lateral descending pathways cause contraction of distal fingers and wrist, but medial pathways cause contraction of muscles in the trunk and in proximal part of the head. So this lateral medial divisions can be found in segmental organization, propriospinal organization, and descending pathways. Right? So let's see some names here. In the lateral system, we have lateral corticospinal tract, rubrospinal tract. But for medial system, we have ventral corticospinal tract. So lateral, ventral, right? Reticulospinal tract, vestibulospinal tract, tectospinal tract. So corticospinal means it starts from the cortex, reaches the spine. Tectospinal means it starts from tectum in the brain, goes to the spinal. Reticulospinal, from the reticular formation goes to spinal. So we have divisions, medial, lateral. Lateral systems or lateral tracts are for contraction of distal parts. Medial systems are for contraction of axial and proximal muscles. Right? Got this? So when you move your finger, which pathway is activated? Lateral system. Mainly this one. Right? But when you bend like this, yeah, medial systems are activated. Right? Mainly vestibulospinal, reticulospinal, or ventral corticospinal. Okay? So, now let's talk about reflexes. I told you that we have reflex movements, rhythmic movements, postural movements, and voluntary movements, right? So now let's start with reflex movements. The first one is stretch reflex. Stretch reflex means if you stretch a muscle, it contracts. So it opposes stretching, right? It opposes being stretched. So not only the same muscle, but also co-worker muscles contract. So, for example, you stretch one flexor muscle, the same flexor, and other flexors contract. Right? So this is called stretch reflex. So, whenever a muscle is stretched suddenly, the large muscle fibers of the stretched muscle and also of synergistic muscles are contracted. The receptor responsible for this is muscle sphincter. I told you that reflex is activated by a sensory stimulation. Sensory stimulation needs receptor. So the receptor should be activated, then we can have movement, right? So receptor here is muscle sphincter. Muscle sphincters are small fibers that are located between larger fibers, right? So now let's see the connections, the neural connection. So we have large muscle fibers, the red ones here. Between them we have a spindle. Inside the spindle we have smaller fibers, right? So they work as a receptor. So we have sensory innervation of the muscle spindle. So if we stretch the muscle spindle is activated, it sends signal to the spinal cord, goes to the spinal cord, activate alpha motor neuron, the black one. Alpha motor neuron come back to the muscle, causes contraction. Right? So stretch of a muscle contracts the muscle. Right? So this is called stretch reflex or myotatic reflex. The name, another name is this, myotatic reflex. Okay. So in a muscle, we have two types of receptors, muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs, GTOs. So muscle spindles are distributed throughout the muscle, so all over the muscle we have them. But Golgi tendon organs can only be found in tendons, at the junction of the tendon and muscle fibers, right? So this is very important. Muscle spindle is sensitive to length, but Golgi tendon organ is sensitive to tension. So when you stretch the muscle, you increase the length, right? Which one is activated? Muscle spindle. If the muscle contracts, tension increases, right? Which receptor is activated? Golgi tendon. So Golgi tendon organ is activated when we have contraction. Muscle spindle is activated when we have stretch. When we increase the length of it. Okay. So now let's see spindles. I told you that they are very small, located between the extrafusal fibers, right? So this one and this one are extrafusal fibers, the main fibers of the muscle. Then we have spindle here. Spindle is covered by a sheath. This one. Inside the sheath we have several smaller fibers, right? So they are intrafusal fibers. Remember, extrafusal fibers were innervated by alpha neurons. Intrafusal fibers are innervated by gamma neurons. So gamma neuron innervates intrafusal fiber, but alpha neuron innervates extrafusal. One more thing. Intrafusal fiber in the middle part don't have any actin and myosin, right? So the middle part of the intrafusal fibers are not contractile. They cannot contract. But the two ends have actin and myosin, right? So let's see. Intrafusal fibers in the middle part don't have actin and myosin, but in the polar one or in the two sides, they have actin and myosin. So they can contract on both ends, but not in the middle part, right? So the middle part is innervated by sensory neurons, not motor neurons. But the ends are innervated by motor neurons, gamma, right? The sensory neuron which innervate the middle part include type 1A fiber and type 2 fibers. Remember that we had 1 alpha, 1 beta, 1 gamma, 1 delta, A alpha, A beta, A gamma, A delta, right? And then we had C fibers, undivided. But we had also type 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 were similar to C type, undivided. 1 is similar to A alpha, right? 2 is similar to A beta and gamma. And 3 is similar to type A delta. Remember that, right? So now we are using this system, type 1 and type 2. 1A, 2. So they are large myelinated fibers that innervate the middle part of the spindle, right? Okay. So if if you stretch the muscle, spindles are also stretched. The middle part is stretched. These sensory neurons are activated. So they make action potentials and send them to the spinal cord. Right? So they function as receptors. Okay? Now, if you want to activate the spindles, one way is to stretch the muscle. The other way is to keep the length of the muscle constant, but activate gamma neurons. Again, you know that gamma neurons innervate the two ends that can contract. If gamma neurons are activated, the two ends contract. What happens to the middle? Stretch. The size of the muscle is the same, but the spindle is stretched only, right? extrafusal fibers remain constant, intrafusal fibers are. So we have two ways for activation of a spindle. The first one, which is simple, is to stretch the whole muscle. The second way is only activate gamma neurons to stretch the middle part of the spindles. Right? So usually in normal situation, when we don't move, when we don't have contraction in the muscle, right? We have always activation of gamma neurons. So continuous activation of gamma neurons always activates spindles. So the spindles continue to send action potential to the spinal. So let's see this condition, muscle at rest. Extrafusal fibers, intrafusal fibers, spindle. The middle part is innervated by sense neuron, right? Once it is at rest, but we have some action potential. So these are action potential, right? So we have three action potential here when there is no contraction in the muscle, right? Now the same muscle is stretched. What happens? The number of action potential increases, right? Now the same muscle is relaxed. Length decreases. Muscle is shortened, right? So what happens? Action potential stops. So in the resting state, we had action potential, now we don't have. Right? So when the muscle is at rest, we have gamma activation, the spindle is stretched, we have action potential. The same muscle is stretched. Then frequency of action potential increases. We call this positive response. Same muscle contracts or is relaxed. It shortens, right? The spindle is released. So the number of action potential, we call this negative response. So positive response means increase in firing, negative response means decrease in firing. Okay. We are talking about the stretch reflex, right? Now, imagine that this muscle, the extensor of the knee, is stretched. Spindle is activated. Action potential goes to the spinal cord through 1A fiber. It reaches the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, it has two branches. The first branch goes directly to the alpha motor neuron. Alpha motor neurons come back to the muscle, causes contraction. So the muscle which is under the stretch is contracted. The second branch activates an interneuron which is inhibitory. Inhibits the alpha motor neuron that goes to the opposite muscle. It causes relaxation. Right? So when you stretch the flexor, or here it's the extensor of the knee, right? When you stretch it, it contracts. What happens with the opposite muscle? It is relaxed. Why? Because we have two branches in the spinal cord. One branch directly activates alpha motor neuron to the same muscle. The second branch activates an interneuron which inhibits alpha motor neuron to the antagonist muscle. At the same time that we have contraction in the agonist, we have relaxation in the antagonist. So we can now complete our definition of the stretch reflex. Whenever we have a stretch of a muscle, the same muscle contracts, the antagonist muscle relaxes. Right? So this pathway is called monosynaptic pathway. Monosynaptic pathway, because we have only one synapse. But remember that we had also type 2 fibers that is not shown here. It starts from the spindle, goes to the spinal cord, it activates several interneurons, and interneurons activates alpha motor neurons. Right? So that pathway is called disynaptic or multisynaptic pathway. So this is the stretch reflex. I think it's enough for today. Okay?